All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat,
And I'm Eric.
And I am Stan.
and today we are going to be talking about the Final Fantasy VIII Remaster. It's coming out tomorrow, and apparently there's some censorship in there. So we're going to talk about whether we think it is actually censorship. What is the past history with Final Fantasy and censorship? We just want to get into that and really try to work through this and see what we think about this after we're done with it. Then we have Yakuza 7. Apparently it's going to be turn-based, so that's exciting. So we're going to talk about that. And then we have Trials of Mana gameplay. It's kind of late to this announcement, but there's been some gameplay that's been shown online that we want to talk about from Gamescom. And then East 9 Monstrum Nox. I hope I said that correctly, but there's a new trailer. We're not really familiar with the series. I think Stan is probably the most familiar. So we're excited to see what this next game is going to be, and maybe some people in the comments can fill us in on our informational gaps where they may be. And then we have some CyberPunk 2077 video that we want to go over, talk about some of the gameplay elements that were revealed, and that will round up this week's podcast. Now, the only thing that I've been playing this week is Grandia 2. I really wanted to get Astral Chain. I really wanted to get Astral Chain. I thought about buying it several times, and I didn't get it because I still have to get through Fire Emblem. I'm still not done with it. I'm trying to get through Grandia 2. I'm still working on Final Fantasy 14, and then I have Final Fantasy 8 coming out tomorrow. I'm just like I'm just telling myself there's no reason for me to buy Astral Chain. There's no reason because I would play
games,
Yeah, I would play it for like 3 hours and be like, "This is awesome," and then I wouldn't pick it up again for like 4 months. So,
have you seen Metacritic user scores for it? Like, there's like a 1,400 like to 900 dislike ratio.
it's because people. Yeah, that's because people have been like trolling. Apparently, I've read online that that's a thing now where people are going to Astral Chain and like they're just trolling dislikes because people are mad that it's getting so much positive press, which is weird because I think it's because some people have been talking about it being game of the year. And I don't know, for whatever reason, that makes people mad because the year's not over. Maybe there's other games they felt were better. I don't know, but I know that's a thing. Like people are just going on there and leaving bad. Like, no, I hated it, zeros, which is silly.
I don't know the full story to it, but one of the comments I read in there was that they need to stop using cell shading. Nintendo, for the love of God, stop using cell shading. You put it in everything. And it was a 0 out of 10, and that was the comment.
Oh boy.
I thought people like platinum games, right?
I did too. I thought people were looking forward to this. I thought Near Automata, like, like it's got some Bayonetta. They've got some good people working on this with really solid past entries. Like, it seems weird to me that people would be upset that there's a good game that you can buy.
There is some legit criticism of the game. Like, there's a lot of downtime between the high action scenes and like just more non-action scenes running around mission type of deal. But like another criticism I see of it that people keep talking about is like it's not like Metal Gear Rising or Bayonetta or what was the other Platinum game? But they don't have high combo systems like that. There's no combo system to the game. I'm like, does it have to be? It's like this isn't those games. It's a different game. It's a different series. If it was Bayonetta 3 and it was like that, then yeah, I would totally get where you're coming from. But this is a whole new IP altogether, and they want to try something different. And what looks to be different is, what's the best way to put it? Like being one with like your character and the thing that follows you around. I haven't played the game, so I don't know the specifics of that. But
Are you talking about the? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's the. I don't want to say the Legion, but I know what you're talking about. It's like the little thing that you're basically connected with, and once you're like all like into the game, it's supposed to be like two parts of one. I don't know. I'm throwing out mangled marketing lines, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's so weird because like critic reviews are pretty high on it, and everyone I've talked to has said they loved the game when they played it. So, like I said, I don't know the story behind where the 900 dislikes came from. Maybe it is a troll, like you said, but that's very weird.
Yeah. What's up, BioPhoenix? He's made it to the podcast. Glad you're here. Yeah, it is weird. I don't know. I don't know why people just get like really upset. It's like those people that were getting upset about the game that looks very similar to Breath of the Wild, and like you had the kid that like broke his PS4, and all the people that are like flicking off like the trailer and stuff. It's just, I don't know, man. It's more options to buy it if you don't like it. Don't buy it. Like I don't know. It's silly.
Yeah.
And have they been to China? They're world renowned for ripping off other games. It's
Right.
nothing new.
It's kind of a thing they do, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Well, it's really hard for them to get games where they are, or like known IPs, because they have a lot of regulations and stuff they have to do to get it approved. So a lot of times they just make their own version of it, of like hardware and software to that does meet this type of regulations, and they get stuff out that way. I don't know the real specific details of it, but that's one of the reasons why you see stuff like that sometimes. Like there was some fiasco a couple years ago that people complained that they were making a Monster Hunter clone type deal. And again, it was like, so what? Like we're never going to see that game.
Yeah, and honestly, like, look, there's more to just copying the user interface and the general art style to a good game, right? And there, with Breath of the Wild in particular, there were some talented people working on that, and there were some very innovative ideas in how you approach game design that went along with that. And it's not easy to just copy it and make it as good. So I don't know. Anyways, but if only we could be as lucky if that copycat ended up being as good as Breath of the Wild, I would buy it happily. So I might buy. I might be in the minority there, but anyways, our first topic here: Final Fantasy VIII Remaster. It's coming to the Switch, Xbox, and PS4 tomorrow. As of this podcast episode, it's September 2nd right now, and I think all three of us are going to buy it. I'm kind of leaning towards the Switch version. Are any of you thinking about getting the Xbox or PS4 version?
Which,
yeah,
I think it's going to be the same exact game no matter. I don't think it's going to be better or worse no matter what you get it on.
Just for the portability, and also the backgrounds, right, might not be as big an issue on a portable screen. Like you're still going to notice, but it's lower resolution anyway.
I mean, there is the PC version that will likely get mods and stuff to make the backgrounds better.
Yeah,
but I don't think I care quite enough to get to want to get the PC version and wait for that. I'd rather just get on the Switch and have the portability factor.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. I mean, yeah, it's cool to mod it and everything, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. And then the mods don't work correctly or something, and you got to uninstall it, reinstall it. It's just a pain. So it would be nice if we got, a modded experience on the Switch, but I think Stan's onto something with that smaller screen. It might just kind of hide some of the jarring effect of not having the backgrounds done like the character models. But unfortunately for Square Enix, there was so much hype for this game, and I think there's still a lot of hype for this remaster, but it's been shown or released. I don't think release is the right word, but it's been pointed out that there may be some possible censorship with this game that's coming out. So let me get it up here on the screen here. Not what I want. Second. So while I'm getting this up, basically there's a screenshot of Siren, one of the summons from Final Fantasy VIII and the prior original PlayStation version. And then there's a screenshot in the Switch version, apparently, or the PS4 version, but I'm sure it's the same. And essentially In the original PlayStation version, she's basically naked almost, and there's a little feather covering her crotch. Whereas in the Switch version, she's got like a full feather skirt. So people are pointing out that, hey, for some reason you altered this design to be a little bit more conservative, and that's made some people really mad. Okay, so I got it here. I'm gonna pull it up. Okay, so here's the image that we're talking about. So this right here on screen is the original image from the PlayStation. You know, she's got some feathers hanging here, and then she has what could be feathers here. Well, you know, I'll leave you to speculate on what that might be. And then over here's the new model, and it's basically the same thing, but she's got this feathered skirt here. And this has gotten people really upset, like really, really upset. I see lots of people saying they're not going to buy the game now because they don't want to support censorship. And the other example that was pointed out was this one with Renoa. On here on the right, you see that the top of her shirt, it's kind of distorted because it's PlayStation graphics, but she had a real low cut shirt. And then in the new model, it's higher cut. So it's, you know, showing less of her cleavage. Although I think in this new high res version, you can probably see more cleavage because it's greater detail, even though the other one was lower cut. This has got people even more upset because, you know, they don't like their Final Fantasy games censored. And we've talked about this stuff before with the Final Fantasy VII.
Newsflash, people, you have been supporting censorship for years.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm getting at. We talked about this before with the Final Fantasy VII censorship, supposed censorship of Tifa, where, you know, people pointed out that she's now wearing a sports bra, and Tetsuya Nomura said, well, you know, we have an ethics department. They suggested that, hey, she's an athlete, that she should probably wear a compression bra because that's what an athlete would wear, so she doesn't have her boobs bouncing all over the place, you know, because this is a greater detailed game. And that got people really upset because they said, hey, there's an ethics department. But what people don't realize is, like, the ethics department, what they do is they counsel the developers on how to get specific ratings in different regions. And a lot of times that changes on the current climate or, you know, the general cultures and customs of a particular nation. And sometimes they've even censored stuff for their own games. So we thought it would be interesting if we just went over some of the censorship from the past games, because they've censored every single Final Fantasy and every single release going all the way back to Final Fantasy 1. And so this is actually one of Final Fantasy's cherished traditions, is censorship of some kind. So I don't think people realize this, but let me pull this up here. And let me see. I think I sent you guys the same article. Let me see if I did that. I know we were looking at it earlier, but just so we're on the same page, I just sent it into our little group chat there. So we're just going to quickly go through this, and we'll just comment where we feel it's necessary. But so in Final Fantasy 1, the localization was essentially identical to the original Japanese game. This is from FinalFantasy.fandom.com's wiki censorship. Technical limitations and the censorship policies of Nintendo America resulted in a few minor changes to certain elements, such as they prevented games from featuring any overt Judeo-Christian imagery or reference to death. So some graphics were modified. For instance, churches were renamed clinics and no longer crosses. This is also why the kill spell was renamed as rub, which is strange.
I mean, this is very common during that era. Yeah. I mean, even all the way up to the ESRB rating system being established, Nintendo had a very, very strict, firm stance on staying as child family friendly as possible in their games. So there was a lot of censorship in games that came over. You could not get the Nintendo seal of approval until you have met their standards. Like Dragon Quest actually had a similar affair. They couldn't just simply put a cross in or say God or anything like that. So they had things like the goddess and a different way of showing off the cross and stuff like that. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they had to make workarounds to not be affiliated with like any kind of religion, a Western religion.
Yeah, I mean, it go.
That era.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do similar stuff with the other games, but I mean, it points out Final Fantasy IV. Rosa is rescued at the last moment from being executed by a giant scythe. And a cutscene in the original version, the scythe was replaced with a giant metal ball in the North American version because they felt this, I guess, could be construed as, I don't know, satanic. It has religious imagery, like you were mentioning with God, but they removed the word holy and it became white magic, right? Um, in Final Fantasy V, the sprite of the boss, I can't remember how to pronounce this, Melusine, was changed to for the remaster version, depicting her with less revealing clothes. So right here you have almost the same type of thing where
how many years ago?
Yeah, this was a long time ago, but she's got very revealing clothes on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it's basically the same thing, but it shows it covers a little bit more of her breast. Final Fantasy VI, there's all sorts of stuff that's been changed in different versions.
Can't see Sour's butt anymore.
Yeah, but one of the things that was huge was during the scene where Locke and sees Celeste imprisoned in South Figaro. She's no longer being beaten by the guards in the Game Boy Advance version. They merely taunt her. So the censoring of Celeste's beating isn't from the localization. This was also present in the Japanese Game Boy Advance version. And this, they said, came about because Japan initially didn't have a ratings board for Final Fantasy when Final Fantasy VI first came out. But when the Game Boy Advance version came out, they did. And any game that depicts violence against a restrained human, that's automatic higher rating, which isn't something they wanted. So because of the climate change in the country, they took that out of even the Japanese version. So they do all sorts of stuff. They point out that Kefka, one of Kefka's line when the party flees from him on chocobos, he says, originally, "Arg, you scums, I will definitely pay you back for this." But depending on the version, he either says "son of a submariner," they'll pay for this in the SNES PlayStation version, or "son of a sandworm," you'll pay for this in the Game Boy Advance version. I mean, like they change stuff.
Even changing that, the game went to everyone 10 plus in the Game Boy Advance version for the American version.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's all about sales. They want their games to be more accessible. They point out that in Final Fantasy VII, Coral Prison shows the billboard for Shinra Electric Power Company spray painted over the word FUCK, and the final game is further painted over into PYCK. The Honeybee Inn, there was a lot of content in there that ended up not being in there. FIFA uses. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you're going to expect that to be even more different come in March, right? When the remake comes around.
Yeah, I'm absolutely, and that's the thing too. Like with Final Fantasy VII, like the fact that when that game came out, that got a teen rating is outrageous because, like, I'm pretty sure that like when the ESRB back then, like they didn't play the entire game. I'm sure, like they didn't 100% the game. Like I think I read somewhere that they only played like 4 or 5 hours, and they just tried to get a general idea of the game, right? So I'm pretty sure they didn't see Cloud pretty much get raped. They didn't see all this blood. They didn't see how much Barrett's a loose cannon and just cussing nonstop towards the end, and like these people dying and like cities being burned. Like they didn't see all this. So like these are like concerns that they're gonna have. Let me see. There were some other good ones though.
There's a weird one for Final Fantasy VIII itself. Going back to this again, I'm looking at in Ultimecia's castle. There is the armory room. If you look at the website that we're looking at through,
yep, got it up.
In the Japanese version, there's there in the top right corner of the picture. There's a sword placed into the wall, and it has blood coming down. And so what they do in the localized version is they just make the blood green. That's it. I guess you can get away with the blood factor because I don't think there is any blood in 8. Is there, besides the
what about
fake selling monster?
Here's the well, I don't know if there's blood, but what about when he gets impaled? I don't think there's blood.
There isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's some mature themes in the game. Like there's an attempt of an assassination, like a legit assassination. That's pretty mature. Like we said, Squall getting impaled. And I'm not trying to spoil the game any more than that. Sorry, guys. But I don't think there is any blood. So I guess that's one of the things they had to change to get the rating.
But it looks like ever since Final Fantasy VIII, they've been pretty light.
Well, Final Fantasy
censorship.
Final Fantasy 12 had a pretty big censorship for Japan because the whole instance where Penelo is tied up and she's been abducted. Apparently, when Final Fantasy 12 was released in Japan, there was some infamous abduction thing going on of Japanese women, and they had just caught the guy and he was sentenced to death. And there was all this like public discussion about abducting people. So they actually removed that portion from the game. Apparently Penelo is just like missing from the game in the Japanese version. And then she's like comes back to the game or something. It's very kind of disjointed.
Yeah, I remember this particular scene. It's it's when the Bagamnen captures Penelo. And they're trying to interrogate her, asking her where Balthier is, and that you were, hanging around with him, so you should know where he is. And Penelo's telling him she has no idea. She met him just time. They didn't do anything to her in that scene. She was just like tied up and she was just like handcuffed and sitting on the floor, just talking to them. They didn't like do anything to her. They didn't hurt her or anything or instigate that they're going to hurt her. They were just, yelling and screaming at her for the most part. But there was nothing bad besides that. But from what I see here, it looks like there was some sensitive topic in Japan at the time in terms of like kidnapping. I guess that was something that was going on at the time. They probably took the scene out just to not cause any controversy.
Well, and that's an instance where Square censored their own country, but in the rest of the world, they got the actual version of the game, like the full version. So that's pretty. That's
just pretty to show, like, it's a good example, right? That they're not doing this like to, like, censor the West or whatever. They're just trying to make it's a money thing. They need it to be a certain rating so that they can sell more copies of the game. And it just happens to be that the West in general as a culture is more sensitive to sexual and religious content, right, in media, that it's not really a Square thing. They're not like deliberately saying like, don't show that in the Western version. I mean, it's ultimately their decision, but they're trying to lower the rating to make more money, essentially.
Right. And the thing is, if you're a developer and you're trying to get your game out to different countries, I mean, if you have to realize that, as Stan just said, every country has their own culture. They have their own vision of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And if you want your game to sell in that country, you have to work with the company from that country to make sure that that it is appropriate, because there might be some things in Japan that they consider that's a-okay, because like even the act of sex is like a normal thing over there to them. They still do like censorship of sex and such, but in the West they treat it more like a taboo, if anything. So depicting that kind of content is very risque. Over here in the West, and even to Europe to an extent. And you have to make those workarounds, or it just becomes more trouble for you. It may become unappealing to your audience and they don't want to play it. This is like even in the case of like we were just talking about China earlier. In World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 11 and 14, every kind of skeleton model that they have to completely redesign them to not be skeletons, but something else. And then they release those monsters in China. They have to go through all these rules and regulations to make sure that it's culturally appropriate for them. So, and the developers understand this. And it's not like some artistic vision. It's like, oh no, this game is completely ruined now. Like, I've not seen any real RPG that, like, the censorship. I'm sure there's some out there someone can probably say to me, but in terms of bigger titles like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, stuff like that, I've never seen censorship go so far that it completely destroys the game. Like I said, you can name one or two at me if you want, but in the general consensus, that is not a normal thing.
Well, I mean, to speak off this, and I can think of one, I think, in particular, but I don't know. I think they had more problems than just censorship. But the thing is, people got to realize every single company, even outside of game design, they have departments where they counsel the leaders of that business on how to interact with different nations because there's different cultural norms, right? And you don't want to accidentally offend someone, or perhaps something that isn't a big deal to you would mean something very different in another country, right? So let's say a Japanese video game, they're creating a JRPG, and in the game, the heroes of light, what they are a bunch of guys in like white robes and hoods that trample down the hills on horses and save the day. Well, that might seem fine in Japan, but that would be a horror show if you released that in the United States, because everyone would think that's the KKK, right?
Yeah.
Like but they need someone to tell them that, because they don't know about the KKK probably as much as we do. That's not something they would be endowed with like every single day. So they need someone to counsel them on this. And there's stuff for every single nation that they need to know about. And then also these departments are telling them, hey, this is what you need to do to get a teen rating in France. This is what you need to do to get a teen rating in America. Like this is very important. If they just, made their own game and didn't do any kind of research, there could be like disastrous consequences. But one game I think was, you could say censorship played a role, and it was a Final Fantasy game, and it was a recent one too, was Final Fantasy 13, because it says the original game had them worshiping like a Grim Reaper. It was a very dark. I saw lots of stuff about, not in this particular article, but in the past, about, and you can see it in trailers where Luna's character, she was being abused throughout her entire childhood. And this is why she grew to resent the Empire and why she was so willing to help Noctis. We actually have actual story-based trailers of this. And some of the developers have stated like, like we felt like that was probably not the best thing to like, if we wanted a teen rating, to have that in the game with, this little girl getting beaten by this knight, especially for Japan, that just wouldn't, because originally Versus 13, that was supposed to be a knockoff or like a off title. So it could have an M rating, but for Final Fantasy 15, it could not have an M rating. It's always been teen. So they had to lighten some of that stuff up. I wouldn't say that ruined the game, because you could still tell a really good game without having that content in there. And it wasn't really developed to begin with, but I could see where it could play a role, I guess. But if someone's really trying to claim that, their game was a good game and it became a bad game because, they took one little scene or changed the blood to green or something, that's just silly. So.
I just find the comment like, I'm not going to support this company because they do censorship, when like almost every game that you've bought that's come from Japan has likely been censored in some way, shape, or form. And it's one thing if it like drastically alters like the story or game or whatnot, but a lot of time it's not. It's like they covered up Siren's butt. They covered up a little bit of midriff on a character. They turn the blood to green. It's like, do these elements really take you out of it? Because a lot of times if you're not told before what,
there's no way you would know. Yeah.
No, right. Like you don't really have a good idea if this is something censored or not. Like they they clearly didn't put like just a black bar over it. They try their best to make it work with the environment.
Well, we don't even and we don't even know what kind of considerations they had. Maybe there was conversations such as, hey, in Final Fantasy VIII, you have an attempted assassination where he literally fires a gun at someone's head. Like you have somebody possibly being killed. Like you have this, you have that. Like these are all very mature concepts, and perhaps maybe they had to make the decision like, okay, well, what can we change to like try to like lessen the risk? Because there's a certain number of things allowed that are going to allow it to be in a certain threshold for the rating. So I mean, there's all sorts of things, and I forgot to point out too that God, I don't have it up. I had a picture of it, but I went back and watched some of the gameplay footage for some of the channels that have gotten an early access version of this game, and they're streaming it. And there's a summon with Shiva. Shiva, if you remember from Final Fantasy VIII, is basically completely naked, right? Like she's pretty much naked, except she's got like a little patch of ice, like covering up her crotch, and like some like little like ice bra or whatever. They have not changed at all. She's still basically naked. So I wonder why that was the decision. And I suspect maybe they felt like feathers on the crotch. Maybe that was like, well, it's kind of like pubic hair. Maybe after you like touch it up, it'll be hard to distinguish. Whereas with Shiva, that was like ice blocking her crotch. So it's like not part of her body. Maybe that was like the justification there. I don't know. But it just goes to show like they still have like naked women in the game, if that was your thing.
It'd be a fly on the wall for that conversation, right? Between the ratings board and the and the Square's ethics department, right? It's like, okay, we can give you the ice, but the rest, no.
Other pubic hair, that's just taking it too far. Yeah.
Yeah, their summons, they don't really hold back. I mean, on the characters, they kind of do, but like those summons, they just go all out all the time.
Yeah. Oh. I'm still going to buy this game. I'm not and we'll get into more of our thoughts, I guess, next week with our thoughts with the actual port itself. But I think it's exciting. The game's coming to the Switch. It's coming to other systems. This is the PlayStation version, which is really exciting. And I can understand when people feel that they're not getting something that they had before. But I think that this is going to be not that this is a bad version or anything, just I think this is going to be the smallest complaint that I'll have, that they change Sirens into a feathered skirt over a feathered pubic hair. So
I'll just be admiring the fact that they actually got the PS1 soundtrack itself instead of MIDI files.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Remastered it. I'm like, I'm going to enjoy that alone because say what you want about FF8, but that soundtrack is fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for it. But let's see. Let me go to the comments because I think I saw an interesting comment from BioPhoenix. He says, yeah, there's a lot of cultural differences with countries. Also, it's just like how many games over here had to be changed when 9/11 happened. Same concept. Yeah, I mean, anytime there's some kind of huge event like that, they're going to take it into consideration. So
yeah, like the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, there was supposed to be a scene which they had in the trailers, but it was supposed to be like a scene in the movie also. There was going to be a scene where like he's chasing a helicopter full of criminals, and he stops the criminals by putting the helicopter webbed up in between the two towers. And obviously, you can see they took that out of the movie, so you can't find that anymore, and that's because of the tragedy that happened back in 2001.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's unfortunate. I mean, I wish we did live in a world where we didn't have to worry about these things, and I could get the full non-messed with version. But even of games we love like Final Fantasy VI, there's been so many different versions with different little changes here and there. It's part of the game. So
it's nothing dramatic. You get the same exact story as everyone else ultimately.
Exactly.
Those teeny tiny little changes aren't going to affect anything. Or if Kefka says son of a submariner instead of, whatever it says in the Japanese version, it's like it's not going to break the game's story just because of it.
Yeah, exactly. So that is our thoughts on censorship. Now, I suspect there's going to be a lot of you that disagree. And if so, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments because I really want to understand where y'all are coming from. So definitely interested in hearing that. But let's go ahead and move on to Yakuza 7. I'm not really familiar with the Yakuza series at all, but when Eric told me it was going to be turn-based, I decided to look into it for Yakuza 7 because that sounded interesting to me. But Eric, how do you feel about Yakuza 7 being turn-based? I made some notes about what they're actually going to do with the battle system, but just in general, how do you feel about that?
I guess it's okay, but it's such a weird, dramatic change. Now, the game has always had like RPG like leveling elements. Like every Yakuza game up to the point has mostly been you have like an open world in the city, and there's missions you take on, main missions and side missions you take on within it. And you had like battle areas, and it was kind of like a Virtua Fighter, a little bit of Virtua Fighter type of thing, or brawler type of deal. Um, and that's where the action adventure aspect came in for it. But it looks like it's going to be the same kind of Yakuza game, but instead of the brawler aspect of it, they've just turned it turn based like Persona. So that's the major difference I've seen so far, and it's a really awkward decision. But if they want to shake things up, I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but
Right.
it's just something I didn't expect. That's something I expect they do like in a spin-off game, because they got plenty of Yakuza spin-off games.
Well, for the producer actually kind of spoke about what the battle system would be like, and we can just go through that a little bit to get an idea. So he says battles are seamless, so they take place within the environment you were in, and not a separate screen. So there's no transition screen, right? The environment around you still moves, so he puts it as the city still breathes while the battle's going on. You can still grab things and use items from your environment to attack your enemy. There's still sudden attacks. You can still surround enemies. There's combos and chain techniques with button prompts, but there's more RPG elements. So there's lots of skills and class changes and stat manipulation. And they're calling this the live command RPG battle. So, and he also said if it's really unpopular, they'll go back to a more action styled system for future games. But it sounds like he just wanted to kind of change things up. And it doesn't sound like it's exactly turn based because of what he said, where you can still use items that are around you to attack the enemy and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to sound hypocritical, because like I'm fine with like Final Fantasy changing its formula every game, because uh the game just by design has just always been played to not always, but more recent titles they've just like kind of changed the formula, uh which I've been okay with. But then like I see this and I'm like, I don't know. The game has always just stayed true to itself, like the way it is, for better or for worse. And I feel like this is something you might have tried in a spin-off game to see if people really like it or not, and to
Right.
transition it into your main game. But hey, you never know. This might be the right direction the series needs, because as much as I love the first three Yakuza games, there isn't too much to think about in terms of the fighting combat. It's not particularly hard, or you don't have to be but so strategic. As long as you have yourself set up correctly, it's most of the time you can. Most of the time, it's not too bad. So maybe adding a RPG tactical system might bring a lot of more dynamic um, type of systems and strategy to it. Now, this can be very unappealing, but on the other hand, it could be very unappealing to people who enjoy the action aspect of it and don't really play turn-based games, because There's actually, believe it or not, a lot of people who got into this series thinking it was going to be more like a Grand Theft Auto game. But if you play it, it's only kind of similar to GTA, but they enter the game. So you might be alienating a certain type of audience turning it turn-based. I don't think your audience is primarily JRPG players. So I don't know. It can really go either way. It could either just be a bust or it could be a major success. It's something I'm interested in seeing how they go with it.
I think that for me, being a person who has not really played the games, I think that I am more interested into it for obvious reasons. I'm really into JRPGs, but I find it interesting that a modern game that's been known to be more action based is going turn based rather than, the opposite. Because so many times you see games that were turn based and they're trying to work out those issues and make it more action based. You see that with Final Fantasy, where they've really been trying to incorporate more action elements, or in 15's case, actually be more just basically an action-based game, or with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, they're trying to make it seem turn-based, but it's really an action battle system. So there's these big franchises that are turn-based that are going towards more action-based system, but he feels the need to go to turn-based. I just think that's kind of interesting in of itself.
Yeah, I can't really think of an example other than this, where you had like an established franchise that was not turn-based gameplay, and they decided to turn it into turn-based, other than maybe like the next entry in a series, like it's on mobile or like it's on the handheld system. Maybe then you tweak it from real time to turn-based in some cases, but not for your like next entry in the franchise. That's very
bold.
Like Eric was saying, it seems like more of something you would do with a spin-off title, to see how it works and to see how the audience responds to it, rather than just here's the next chapter right in the franchise, and it's we're going from a kind of a 3D beat 'em up brawler type of system to turn-based RPG.
Yeah. I love how those are good points. But I like how, like, anytime there's like some kind of change in the battle system formula for a game, like the developer always tries to like name the battle system like it's gonna catch on. So he names it here like Live Command RPG Battle. I remember for Final Fantasy 12 they named that one like Active Dimension Battle System, and I'm like, no one's gonna call it that. So
whatever sounds good in the press release.
It's like, hey guys, if Final Fantasy can go from a turn-based game to an action game, we can turn our action game into a turn-based game.
Why not? Like Yakuza 8's just like a text adventure.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get it. If you're making these many Yakuza games, then I understand you got to spice things up sometimes or change things around a little bit to, keep the game refreshing feeling, because eventually you're going to get to like Yakuza 10 and people are going to be like, it's the same game every time. So I understand where you want to change things up a little bit, but I don't know if turning the game turn-based was the right decision. But like I said, it could be the greatest decision they ever make or the worst mistake they ever make. So we'll see if they hit lucky number 7.
Yeah. BioPhoenix in the comments says, as a fan of the Yakuza series, I'm open to it. As long as they make it fast and fluent like how they did in Persona 5 or Cold Steel, then I'm all for it. And he goes on to say the Tales of series gets weird with turn-based names. It's funny. I'm not familiar with any of the names, but yeah, every time I read one, I'm just like, that's silly. That's silly. But anyways, so Eric, are you still going to buy Yakuza 7? Is this a deal breaker?
I mean, I haven't played 4, 5, or 6, so I'm a little behind on that. But from what I've obviously seen stuff from 4 to 6, and the fundamentals of them have not changed that much. And of course, they've gotten better each game. Like, they've improved the formula and everything, but the fundamental level of it has not changed that much. Like, this is the first real jump over to something else. Like, even their spin-off games have, a familiarity to the original Foundation.
And I think this is supposed to be starting a brand new story too, right?
There's a new protagonist, from what I understand.
Yeah, so this might be a good place for people that haven't played the other 6 and are a little intimidated to jump on.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a good new starting point. I do want to play 4 through 6. It's just I don't feel like
it's not right now.
A lot of time I got to put into it for those games.
Yeah. Now you know how I feel about Final Fantasy 11.
You mean 14?
14 is a little more tolerable because there's less of a mountain for me to overcome. I've already started that one, but when
one thing, but I completely understand anyone not willing to put the time into 11 because that is a night. Like the story in that game is good.
Yeah,
not as good as 14, but it's a good story. But I do not expect anyone to deal with the nightmares that you have to go through to get that story.
Yeah, so I'll be interested in this game. This might be the first Yakuza game I play. And of course, everyone's going to be telling me I have to play the other Yakuza games because it's nothing like all the other ones. But whatever.
2020 release, I think, right?
2020 release. So be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Moving on though, Trials of Mana gameplay. So Trials of Mana is the remake of. Well, this is the new name they're going under, Trials of Mana. That's the new English name.
Yeah, so it's a remake of Seiken Densetsu 3.
Right. So we got first of all, we had never had an English version, and that was finally translated officially for Collection of Mana, which I know, Eric, you picked up. And then they also announced this remake. So this is like a full 3D remake. So I'm going to pull up some of the gameplay.
And it's not like the Secret of Mana remake either, where they just did the cheapest job possible and just made like 3D like models and environment. Like this is like a straight on full remake reimagining. Mm-hmm. It's a full production game.
All right, reconnection. Mm-hmm. All right, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, it's having some OBS issues. But anyways, you saw a little bit of a clip there. It looks like a really good like port, like a really actual, like Eric was pointing out, they actually put work into it. When you watch some of the early town stuff, like it kind of looks like they're going for like a touched up, like more detailed N64 game, because like you can see stuff like there's like repeating textures, like the brickwork is clearly the same brick multiplied over and over again, and everything's a very straight edge. There's no like, the road's not torn apart. There's no grass growing through the cement. All the railings are perfectly cut. But I wouldn't say it looks bad. Like I think it almost is very nostalgic looking, and definitely once you see some of the shots where they're going into like the forest and stuff, like it looks really, really good for what they're trying to do here. Like you can definitely see a lot of variety in like the different patches of grass and the lighting, and the user interface is all lit up and it looks really, really smooth. The only thing I didn't like from what I've seen is that the facial expressions of the characters when they're talking, first off, the voice acting isn't spectacular, but it's better than the Secret of Mana remake. But also when they're talking, the eyes just are not very expressive. But again, this game's not coming out for a while, so they might work a little bit more on that. But I think that's going to be an issue for me. But other than that, like it's looking really, really good.
I mean, it looks like there is a major effort being put towards this remake. Like I said, compared to the Secret of Mana remake, which was almost bare bones nothing. Like they somehow made the soundtrack sound even worse in that game, and like the gameplay. I mean, while the gameplay felt a little better than the original, it just felt like such a shallow remake, like something you would find more on mobile than a $40 game. But this looks like a full legit, like a full retail game. Like it's like we were saying before we got cut off. Like it's a full reimagining, like how FF7 is a FF7 remake. Trials of like Second Desetsu 3 to this is just a full reimagining of the game. Now, I imagine that like there's going to be some elements that are the same, but it's going to be a pretty different game overall.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not going to be the same experience. That's for sure. Because to be honest, I really I like the original game. Like it's fun to play. I like it better than Secret of Mana, but it's still not my favorite game to play for various reasons, which we can get into. But I mainly it just comes down to the UI and then the combat. There still seems something off with it. It's better than Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is just like there's like some kind of delay. It feels like when you're attacking enemies and like your character's constantly you're not able to act after an animation and you're getting struck a billion times and it just drives me nuts. But that's my personal weakness as a gamer. I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone that likes Secret of Mana. So
that's fine, Hat. You're telling it how it is.
Games.
Yeah.
I like the game, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
Like
all three games have awful UIs. I will definitely say that.
Yeah.
So the third one in particular, like I appreciate they have a system where outside of combat you can put items in and out for your characters, but it's still so awful having to switch that stuff out. It's just like it's so cluttered, it's so confusing looking. I really hope they fix that in this one where it's not hard at all to do stuff like that. I've not played a Mana game before where the UI has not been awful.
So yeah, no, totally agree. That's one of my biggest. First time I ever played Secret of Mana, and like they brought up that menu system, and you have to like press the up arrow and then the right arrow and then like the left arrow to find stuff, and it's like these like 3 different circles, and then like it doesn't tell you like if something you're gonna buy improves anything until after you buy it. I was just like, what are you doing? Like this is. But anyways, real quick, sorry, this is off topic, but like watching one of these gameplay footages, the character goes into a shop, right? And like these games, they have the genies that are like, they're not genies. They're, I don't know. They have the little genie cap on. I don't know what the
weird dance.
Yeah, the weird dance. And this remake, he's still doing that. It looks weird in 3D, but I love it. I love that they kept that. Let me see. Yeah. But there's some footage from a boss fight. So let me see if I can pull some of that up with the giant crab, which looks really, really cool. So I got that up here, and that's playing. Hold on, put it on the stream.
Yeah, there's a whole Treehouse Live of the gameplay.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, this is just looking spectacular. I think like this is way above and beyond. This is everything they should have done with Secret of Mana when they remade that game. Mm-hmm. Instead, it was like this god awful, low budget mess. It's like I didn't really like Secret of Mana, and I prefer playing Secret of Mana over that remake. So they actually made the game worse, in my opinion. So
one thing I really do hope that they do in the new Trials of Mana is they at least give you a recommended second party member, because they don't tell you at the beginning of the third game like who is the most ideal person to join you, like on both the gameplay and narrative level. So I hope they do something like you can still pick who you want to go with you, but we recommend this character joins this character in the game, because I think that would work out a lot better on both, like I said, narrative and gameplay aspect. Unless it doesn't matter as much in Trials of Mana, then by all means, then pick whoever you want to be your second party member.
Yeah. So this is shaping up to be really good looking. I love how on the battle screen they added so much clarity to the UI. There's little things that pop up and tell you like, hold on, it's going to show you in a second. Some of the like bonuses or chained attacks, it actually pops up and lets you know what you're doing and like where you're at and what they mean. And there's so much helpful stuff on the screen, which is exactly what the original game needed, in my opinion. So this is awesome. So yeah, I plan on buying this game when it comes out, and I think it's going to be sick.
It's coming out pretty good. Also, early 2020. I believe it's a January release.
I think you're right. I know I saw early 2020. January sounds about right. And I think that's perfect timing because we have the Final Fantasy VII Remake in March, and then we have CyberPunk in April, I believe. So if this came out in the January timeframe, that would be perfect for me.
Yeah, sounds good. On just another note, I'm just watching through the gameplay again. It looks like they took away the like, you know how you like strike once or twice and then your character is in a in a recovery state,
Right.
and you kind of just have to hope you don't get hit by enemies. It kind of looks like they took that out of here. I could be wrong, but it looks like they have like your basic combo system, and then you can evade and dodge out.
Yeah, I wasn't
really good.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing anything like that, and like it wasn't original. Where like once you attack, there's like this half a second or second delay, maybe a little bit.
That's something I never cared for in the Mana, and Secret of Mana and the Trials of Mana, is that small delay. I got used to it, and it's not a game breaker for me. I still love the games. Don't get me wrong. I like Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana just fine, but like those little elements that they put in to try to be more strategic just didn't work as well for me as it did for other people.
Yeah, they were trying to change up the formula, and there's a certain amount of risk when you do stuff like that. It's either going to work or it's not going to work, and I think that's one of those things where I'm just told it didn't work as well as they had hoped. So, but yep, very, very excited.
Looks good.
Moving on though, we have East 9. I think that's how you say it. So I've never played any of these games. I know, Eric, you said you played a little bit of one of them, and then Stan, you said you played a lot of 4, I think.
Yes, I beat the remake of number 4 that was on the Vita, but that's the only one I've played.
But did you like it?
I did. I liked it a lot. It's a very satisfying gameplay, and multiple characters that all kind of play differently. Like they play similar, but they have different skills. And the game really, what I remember the most is it rewards you for being very precise with your defensive options. I don't know if all of them are like this, but at least the one on the Vita has. So you can kind of dodge and do like a dodge roll around the enemies. However, if an enemy is attacking and you dodge at the last possible moment, right, you get what's called like a flash move, and then your character is like sped up, and it's like the enemy is moving in slow motion, and you can really like combo them really hard. And another thing you could do is do a flash guard, which means you blocked at the last possible moment, and that allowed you to the next attacks you did for a certain period of time would all do critical hits automatically because you kind of parried the enemy's attack.
So this is I don't know about those specific examples, but this is one of the things that I noticed from watching the newest trailer that's been released for the 9th game, is that every character they highlight in here has some kind of unique ability to interact with the world that I think is really, really cool. So let me pull up this trailer here. But this is looking to be like a pretty good game. I think I'm going to buy this game. But they have like, there we go, back up. Sorry, guys.
Okay. There we go.
Sorry. So, but I was just saying in the trailer that they released most recently for the Japanese version anyways, it shows characters that can do all sorts of things. Like one can bust through a wall, one can climb up a wall. There's people that can fly, another one can like skate across the grass, and maybe they all can do these things. I don't know. I only saw individual characters that could do them, but I do like the fact that there seems to be different ways you can interact with the environment. I think that makes for a compelling gameplay experience. So
yes, yep.
But Eric, are you planning on picking up the 9th version of this game?
I kind of want to play through some of the older and newer titles. I mean, I'm interested in the series. I've just never taken time to play it. I actually do kind of want to go through it on my iPad when they release the controller support for the tablet, because they actually have the first and second game on there, and I believe they're controller supported. But I'm waiting till Apple officially releases their ability to let you play like PS4 and Xbox controllers on it, or any Bluetooth wireless controller you have on it, and I kind of want to play them on that. So I do want to try it. Like even when looking at the 8th game on the Switch, like it's $60, and I heard it's even more expensive than that when you want to do the physical copy of it. So now I just told myself there's other games I want to play more, but I do want to get into it. I played a little bit of 7, and I liked it for the most part. I kind of didn't get why the game felt very very open-ended, or kind of like didn't have a strong sense of direction with it. But I think that is part of the concept fundamentally for it, that you kind of have to explore and find things, if I'm being correct. And I think that turned me off a little at first, but I think going into it under a new perspective, I think I'll probably like it a lot more.
Yeah. I don't know. I've just heard so many good things about this series. I know BioPhoenix has been talking it up, and I remember you saying you really liked the 4th one. So
that version is available on Steam also for, I think, 25 or $20 or so. So like Eric was saying, the 8th one, for whatever reason, that game's been out for a while, but there hasn't really been a sale on it that I've noticed, or if it does go on sale, not for very long, because I've been wanting to play that one also. But yeah, it's the cheapest one I think that you can get on PC is the Steam version of Memories of Celceta, which is what originally on the Vita and recently came to Steam, I think about a year ago or so.
Right. Yeah. Well, the 9th version, the newest game, it's coming out on September 26th in Japan for the PlayStation 4. There's no American release, North American release date at this time, but I'm sure that this is going to get a North American release. And at that point, I'm absolutely going to give this a shot, depending on the release date in North America. If it comes out around Final Fantasy VII Remake, that would be a bad idea for them.
I think they've been pretty consistent with the YS series, and I think it's the Trail series that has been having weird, inconsistent release schedules for it.
Sure.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
East sounds like it comes out just like pretty soon after the Japanese version. So yeah. I guess there is a pretty. I would guess there's strong sales numbers for those games in the West.
Anyways, we can look forward to that. And what is your favorite East game? Let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll have to try one here before this one comes out. We'll see how time goes. Moving on, though, we have our final topic. CD Projekt Red, they've released some more information on CyberPunk 2077. Mostly a lot more gameplay and things like of that nature, and explaining things about the game. And they also said an interesting statement that they're planning their development cycle. They're looking at, after CyberPunk 2077 comes out, they're going to work on another Witcher game, and then after that comes out, they're hopefully going to do another Cyberpunk game, assuming this game does well. So that's interesting that they're approaching it like that. But they released this long trailer. It's more of a gameplay showcase type deal that's about 14 minutes long. But while watching it, and I'll see if we can play it in a small window here, maybe that'll have better luck here. But while watching it, I noticed there was lots and lots of world building that went into place about this game. For example, they explained that this particular area that the game takes place in, it used to be this city or area that investors were trying to make into this like upper class, like vacation spot, but some kind of calamity happens and they end up pulling all their money from the area. And so crime just is attracted to this location because it's basically been abandoned. And for that reason, there's all these gangs and just, police won't go in there and this type of thing. And so It seems like they've really worked a lot on like the backstory and like why this world is the way it is, which I really, really think it's cool because it's focusing on a strong narrative standpoint of just building this world out and making it feel real. So I think that's definitely really, really cool. But one of the things from a gameplay standpoint that I thought was really unique is they said when you go to create your character, instead of choosing a class, it lets you choose your backstory, right? So it gives an example as you can choose nomad, street kid, or corporate type. And depending on what you choose, that adds different types of side quests and dialogue options in the game. So when you're interacting with NPCs, there'll be different dialogue options, and there's whole little like branching side quests that result based upon the path that you choose, which I think is a really unique idea. Like, hey, what kind of person are you? Not necessarily, like what role do you play in the gameplay, but what is your history? You get to choose that. And so I think that's a really cool way to approach it. And it looks like there's the whole sets of skills and abilities that you can choose that are not really specific to class systems. So you can kind of make a hybrid type character and you're not really refined down to, your what's the futuristic term of a warrior? I don't know. A warrior or a mage or something like that. There's hacking abilities, there's long range, short range abilities. You can do everything if you want to. So I think that's really cool. And these are just things I noticed from the trailer. It also said it gave an example of one of the classes or one of the abilities that you can focus on for hacking, which sounds pretty generic for a futuristic game, right? But I think it works really well for this game, how they show, because this world is very much obviously about like cybernetics and implants and everything like that. So they let you basically hack anything in the game, it seems like. So at one point they have an enemy who's weightlifting and you're able to hack the weightlift bench and the bench just chokes him. Like it won't go back up and you're able to kill him that way. Or they show another option where you're able to hack into another person through their implants. And if you're strong enough, you can like gain information that they know. And there's all sorts of stuff like that they're showing off. So it seems like they're like really going all out for this game, which is really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just watching this. I was like, man, this is sick.
No, totally agree. It just keeps looking better and better. Like all the options you have, yeah. And the thing you mentioned about the backstory, where you're kind of choosing your past, like where you came from up to this point, and how that affects the game. That's going to add replay value, right? If you have a few different ways that you can.
Yeah, because I think that's an interesting way of approaching that. Because usually a lot of the times with open world games, they try to go like the very generic path of, okay, like you're some like warrior from some far off land and you're just coming to this place and you're an adventurer and you're starting off on your first adventure, and or like in like Fallout, like you've lost your memory and you're trying to navigate this world or something along those lines. But they give you a story that's stupid and then you just kind of create your own adventure. This is kind of a unique way of letting you of making a narrative that is more like, because when they give you a story that's set up, they're able to build upon it more so and make it more convincing, I think, because you have a past, there's things for you to talk about, there's things about for you to relate to. So the fact that they're giving you a creative way of choosing that story, it's kind of tricking you into thinking like this is still that same type of open world adventure, but it's not, like, because they've refined it down to 3 options, right? But you have to choose.
Yeah, it's not a silent protagonist like you often get in a lot of these, or silent or kind of like vague
sense,
protagonist. Yeah, it's more like they've written 3 or 4 protagonists, I think you said, and then you get to choose which one will go through the story, and which one you chose is kind of going to affect certain side missions and stuff like that. And so then, of course, everyone who really loves the game is going to go back and play them all, and then you're going to get more more out of the bang for your buck, essentially, out of the game.
Yeah,
that sounds interesting.
Yeah, the replay value sounds really high to people who really want to put the hours into it. I know I've gone through The Witcher like about 2 times. So, I mean, CD Projekt Red knows how to feed the breadcrumbs to you pretty well. So hopefully Cyberpunk will be the same deal where I play through one game, enjoy it, then the next year I'm like, hey, maybe I want to try it with a different character now when I don't have too much going on.
Yeah. Well, I just, my big problem with open world games, and I hate to say my big problem, like I have this like one thing I always go to, but a lot of times, like, because the vagueness with the backstory and then with the character themselves, a lot of times it's just the story, it just isn't there for me like it is with, more streamlined linear games. And that's not the case, obviously, with Witcher 3. That wasn't the case at all because they had a developed character there. So I just like the fact that like this is an open world game, but it's not like oh look, create your own adventure. They're not trying to sell me that. They're trying to sell me like this own like what looks like to be an awesome story. It's almost like I want this to be a movie. Like I'm just like, okay, you have Keanu Reeves. Let's just make this a movie so I can go watch it because this looks sweet. But it's CD Projekt.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, I mean they're making Matrix 4. Might as well make Cyberpunk 2077. Just do it.
Or make like a Cyberpunk 2076 or something, right? And make that the movie and make it like a tie-in, but it can be starring Keanu Reeves and not have anything to do with any of the characters in the game. It can kind of
be how he got his silver hand.
Yeah, the origin of Johnny Silverhand. It writes itself.
Right, they could make stuff like comics and books or stuff if they create like an interesting enough world. You can probably do side stories of other parts of the city, but how other people interact with it.
Just don't do the Final Fantasy 15 thing where some of the essential backstory, right, is in those other media. Don't do that. Expand the story you have. Don't like take one and chop it up. Don't do that.
A third way through the game, like the main character's like missing an eye, but they don't tell you what happened.
Yeah.
Find out later.
I think they know what they're doing. CD Projekt Red. I don't think they'll make that kind of error.
Buy this DLC and find out what happened.
Yeah.
Hook up with this DLC. Yeah. Anyways, so I'm all about futuristic stuff. I love the whole futuristic tech type aspect to these games, and this particular game looks really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to it.
Presentation won me over big time, so I'm excited for it.
Yep, absolutely. And so I think that wraps us up for this week. Checking this out. Looks like I'm assuming Mike says he's played Witcher 3 like 5 times. That's impressive.
But not Final Fantasy 14 once. Come on, man.
Yeah. What's the amount of time it took to play Witcher 3 5 times? And then let's encompass that to like, is that like equal to Final Fantasy 14? I don't know.
I mean, each part of 14 is like the length of a normal Final Fantasy, so kind of do the math from there.
I don't know. Anyways, so that wraps up this week's podcast. Next week, we will be talking about our impressions with Final Fantasy VIII, the remastered version, and whether or not we think the censored bits actually changed the story, or whether this was another round of typical Square Final Fantasy traditional censorship. And if there's any other topics you want us to talk about, gaming news or topic suggestions, just go to our Discord server. There's going to be a link in the description. Click on that, join, and there you can go and suggest topics, interact with us, tell Eric that Final Fantasy 14 sucks. He might give you a 1-week ban if you do that. I don't know. We'll see. But no, I'm just playing around. But anyways, come on there, talk with us. Really appreciate that stuff. We'll talk to you all next week. And thanks, guys, for checking us out. Thanks, guys.
See you later. See you next week.